Hey friend, Graham here from recordingrevolution.com. Let's talk today about how to prepare to record a song. You'd think that recording would be pretty easy. You just flip everything on and you hit record. Well, today I want to walk you through my process that really helps me not only record faster, but get a better recording. We are home studio folk, and so we tend to be DIYers and we tend to just jump in. And while I love that mentality of just jumping in, you gotta treat yourself like a professional. You gotta realize that professional recordings, the ones that you and I love, they're not just winging it in the studio, right? They might leave room for creativity. I'm not saying that, but there is a lot of planning. When you see behind the scenes of your favorite band in the studio, as fun as those documentaries or those little mini-series are, all you get to see is the fun stuff. You get to see them grabbing a microphone and putting it somewhere. You get to see the band joking. You get to see them discovering a cool lick while they're just fiddling around with guitar pedals. What you don't see is all the planning that went into it ahead of time, before the cameras went on, before the band came in, what the engineers, what the producers, what the studio did to prepare. And that is half the battle of getting a really creative session, of having the band feel comfortable. Hey, look, if you are your own band, if you're a one-man, one-woman show like many of us are, right? You're recording your own music, then you still need to set yourself up for success so that your recordings go really smoothly. You can stay creative and in the moment when you're actually tracking, and you get the best sounding tracks possible. So with that introduction out of the way, let me walk you through a few helpful tips and really my process for preparing to record. Now, I will just add this in before I give you the specifics. This came out of studying this at school, for one, working in a professional studio for two, and seeing how well the engineers I worked under prepared for bands. And then three, this was really crystallized for me when I left the studio environment and went freelance, because I'm just kind of an idiot. I want to do everything myself. I don't trust other people. So I want to do it all myself and be freelance. When I went freelance, I did a lot of mobile recording and then some recording out of my apartment. I did a little bit of both. And I developed a process, especially when I would fly on location, when I would literally get in a plane and bring some gear and record an entire band, an album in someone else's house or church or random place. There was a finite amount of time, 3 or 4 days, sometimes 2 days, to do a whole EP before I have to fly back home, where there was a lot of preparation needed on my part and on the band's part. And that pressure to have to get it all done and to sound good and then fly home led me to crystallize this process. So this is born out of a lot of experience in figuring out what really leads to results and what doesn't. So without further ado, let's jump into how you can best prepare to record your song. Step one is to make a list of every single track you're gonna record. You don't want to make this up as you go. So if you are like old school, you have a legal pad, or if you want to have like a Google Doc or something, have a list of every instrument that's going to be in that song. Are you going to have drums? If so, are they acoustic drums, or are they going to be drum loops or a virtual drummer? Where are those drums going to come from? AKA, is it a stereo track, or are you going to have multiple tracks, right? Are you going to have bass guitar, bass synth, guitars, vocals, background vocals, percussion? Map it all out ahead of time. This helps you do two things. One, it lets you know about how much time it's going to take to record, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it also lets you know what equipment you need. For example, if you're going to record multi-track drums, you probably need more than a 2-channel audio interface. Granted, you can record drums with 1 mic, you can record drums with 2 mics and get decent results, but if you want to do multi-track drums and you want to be able to mix them and have tom mics and snare and kick and overheads, maybe even room mics, that would determine what kind of audio interface you need. Now, you might already own that and you're fine. You might not. When I'm traveling, I need to know how many inputs at once do I need to record, because if I don't need to bring a rack-mounted interface, if I can bring a smaller interface, I will, but I need to know ahead of time what am I going to record? Which leads us into step 2, which is know exactly what equipment you need before you start recording. You might already have everything you need if you have a very simple setup and you have a very simple recording process, and if you do the same type of arrangement over and over again. But if you're recording an instrument you've never recorded before, or working with another talented musician for the first time, and you might realize you need, I need another pair of headphones for the talent. I need an audio interface that has 2 headphone jacks, or at least create some routing out of the outputs of my interface to have an independent headphone mix. So maybe I need a headphone amp or a headphone mixer, or I need more cables, or I need more microphones, or I need that type of microphone, or I even need a different space to record in. That's almost like knowing the equipment. Where am I going to actually record this? If it's the same kind of gig, you could probably still do it in your home studio, but maybe you need to record the drums elsewhere and then bring the rest of it here to your home studio. So have a list of every single piece of gear you're going to need to record before you get started. You don't want to be surprised when you're in the middle of a creative moment and be like, crap, I don't have that adapter. I don't have that type of cable. Or my least favorite is that cable's not long enough. Like, that's the dumbest thing when you've got the connection, but it's not long enough. So think through everything you might need, and you might not need much, but just make sure you got what you need. Third step, block out how much time you're going to need to record this song. Again, we don't want to wing it. We want to treat ourselves like professionals. We want to have a calendar, and we want to block out time, studio time with ourselves. You still want to treat yourself like it's on the clock and you're on the clock. The only benefit and difference is that you don't have to pay for the studio time. It's free studio time, but you have to still map it out so you don't take advantage of the owner of that studio, aka yourself, right? So block out some time and then dedicate that time appropriately for your song. So the question is, how long does it take to record a song? Well, this is going to depend on a lot of different things, but I have learned over the years, especially when I had to figure out how to do this when I would travel, because we didn't have the luxury of just tacking on an extra day. I had plane tickets to fly back, so I had to get it all done. I learned that if the band is rehearsed, which we'll talk about in a second, I can record a 4 to 6 song EP in 2 days, 2 full days. And I can record a full-length album of 10 to 12 songs in 4 days. 4 full days. That is how long it took me. So that being said, I think you could record an entire song easily in 1 day, possibly if you're working quickly in half a day, meaning 4 to 5 hours. It just depends. But the truth is, you gain time if you bulk record instruments. So when you drop down the number of songs, you don't cut the number of hours down exactly in proportion to the number of songs, because it takes the same amount of time to mic up a drum kit for 1 song that it does for 100 songs. So it's not quite as simple. I would say for you to record 1 song, probably block out a day. If you don't have a full day, give yourself at least half a day with no interruptions, no cell phone, no social media, nothing, because it really does take time to set up some of these things to record. Now let's walk through a hypothetical recording day for 1 song. It actually starts before recording day, because you've already mapped out what tracks you're going to record, what equipment you need, all that kind of stuff. Before you even hit record, you need to set up and prime your session. If you're in Pro Tools, this is your Pro Tools session. If you're in Logic, it's your Logic session. You want to create a new document or a new project or a new session, however your DAW calls it, and you want to set up a few things before you actually hit record on recording day. What are those things? You want to have the tempo of the song figured out. Okay, so that you can set up the click track or metronome. And yes, you should be recording to a click or a metronome. There's a few rare instances where it doesn't make sense to record to a click or a metronome, but you're probably not the exception to the rule. If you want your song to sound more professional, record to a click. If you want to be able to record your music easier later, record to a click. So figure out the tempo, set up your click track, and then you need to create markers in your session. So in Pro Tools, they're literally called markers, and it shows like verse 1, verse 2, chorus, bridge, the bridge down, the chorus loud, drum fill comes in. You can put visual markers so that you know where the song is. How do you put those if you haven't recorded the song? I'm glad you asked. Record a scratch track. This is so important, especially if you're bringing in other instrumentalists, right, to play alongside you. I like to set up the metronome, plug in my guitar, set up a microphone, and record a scratch or a dummy guitar track and a scratch or a dummy vocal track. You don't have to do them at the same time. You could do the guitar first, or piano if you're a piano player first, then vocal, but you play to the click and you just create a simple map of, okay, here are the chords in the verse, here's the hook, you're singing the song so you know where the lyrics are when it comes in, and you just have a rough version of the song that's in time, in tune, and then you create the markers as such. That is all you need before you hit record. And it's pretty critical to put those in place, even if you are the only musician around here, because it gives you a map to start bringing drums into or coming up with sounds. Like, it's good for you, even if it's just you, is all I'm saying. So you prep that session ahead of time, and then you come on a recording day ready to go. And here is how I would set up a recording day. The first instrument you record is drums, 100% of the time. The reason why is because drums become the foundation for the rest of the band. If you are recording multiple instrumentalists one at a time, you want them all to react to the drummer's vibe, because the drummer sets the tone. If you are the drummer, or if a robot is the drummer, you still want those drum performances to influence the rest of the musician's performances. Drums, whether they're beats, whether they're artificial, whether they're organic and acoustic, they are a foundation of modern music in almost every single genre, and they're so critical to sounding good and also influencing the performance, the vocals, the bass, the guitars. Just the slight nuance of the energy of the drums makes the rest of the music more exciting to play to. So if you want to have more fun playing your guitar or your keyboard or your synth or singing over your track, you probably want the beat in there first. And a lot of you are probably like, yeah, duh, Graham. But a lot of people don't do it this way. They think they should record their main instrument first, the piano or the guitar, and then you add in the drums later. And it never feels like a real band. You never have as much tightness unless you put the drums first. So record drums first. That means if you have an acoustic drum kit, like I've set up here multiple times, you bring in a real drum set, you're gonna have to set up the drum kit, you're gonna have to tune the drum kit, you're gonna have to mic up the drum kit, test the mics, make sure they're sounding good before you can even record drums. With a real band, this usually takes almost all morning just to get the drums sounding good before we can even start recording the drums. The good news is, once the drums sound good, recording goes really, really quickly. If you're using drum loops or if you're using a drum virtual instrument, then you're going to spend most of that time creating the performance over the few hours. And that might be what you need to do. Take 2-3 hours to create the drum performance for your song. If you're recording a real drummer, just a bonus tip, have them play through the song twice, okay? And record both takes. The reason why is they will probably play fills differently, and you can flip back and forth and find the best fills, because they'll probably play the beat about the same, but you get a little bit of variety, a little bit of choice on which fills you pull in for the ultimate drum take later on. After drums, you want to record any other bass instrument. If it's an actual bass guitar or bass synth, why? Because bass and kick drum go together. So it's a lot easier for the bass player, or if that's still you, to think about a really tight bass line with a kick drum if there's no other real instruments fighting for your ear. Just that scratch guitar or piano and vocal letting you know where you are in the song, but you're really listening to the drum performance and then playing the bass or playing the bass alongside that kick drum pattern. After the bass instrument, you want to record the core rhythm instrument, which is usually guitar or the keyboard or piano, right? The things that creating the chordal structure. The thing that was probably in your scratch track that you're going to replace now. So if you have lots of guitars, this will be where you record all the guitars. If it's a piano ballad or if it's a lot of synth stuff, that's where you're recording those main parts, the things that carry the chord progression of the song. After those instruments will be lead instruments, lead guitars, lead piano or synth riffs, right? These types of instruments that come in and out and carry the melody from time to time. The great news about knowing how to perform and record those is you already have a dummy vocal that you're listening back to while you're playing these parts, so you can play around the vocal and know that you're not covering up where the vocal's supposed to go. You have a vocal as a context, because the vocal's the most important thing, let's be honest, unless it's an instrumental track. Next, lead vocals. Lead vocals are so important. If you're the vocalist or you're working with a vocalist, they need, or you need, to hear everything in the mix to really inspire the vocal performance. It makes zero sense, in my opinion, to lay down the true vocal before you have the rest of the band in. It won't be as inspired of a performance. So with all the drums and bass and guitars and lead instruments in, now the lead vocalist, even if that's you, can hear the whole band coming together, and can perform a beautiful vocal. When it comes to recording vocals, I've talked about this ad nauseum over the last decade, but a couple of bonus tips. One, record multiple takes. You never get it perfect in one take, and everything you hear on the radio is rarely one take. It's usually a compilation or a comp of their best performances within multiple takes. I personally don't like to go past 3 takes because I don't want to spend forever editing and hunting later. I record 2 to 3 whole takes of the vocalist. I don't like to stop the vocalist and say, hey, let's punch in the chorus, because it kills the flow. I want them to sing their butt off and feel like it's a real performance. And if they're out of tune or if they screw up a word, that's fine, because A, we're gonna re-record it again and maybe one more time, and B, if it's perfect all 3 times except for that one word, we can always punch in the one word. But let the vocalist or let yourself get full takes all the way through, and then on a separate playlist, which is what they call it in Pro Tools, or a separate virtual track underneath it, or another take, record another pass and maybe a 3rd pass max, knowing that you can comp together the best parts later and then tune that final comp. And finally, any background vocals or harmonies. We have to record these after the lead vocal for obvious reasons. It's hard to harmonize without a lead vocal, and you truly want to harmonize or do the background vocals alongside what's going to be the final vocal. Now you may be asking, well, Graham, we haven't comped the final vocal yet. That's true, but at least you have the true performance, and you get to take the best take and sing the background vocals to the best take, knowing that it might change slightly with the comp, but you can always do some little edits later to get them to sync up. And let's wrap this up with a couple of bonus tips to keep in mind. The best recordings happen only when the band is rehearsed, only when the artist has practiced, and practiced. If you want to enjoy yourself, or if you want your talent to enjoy themselves when they work with you, make sure that they and yourself rehearse before you actually hit the record button. I know we live in a weird, cool world where we can be writing the song with our DAW open and almost be recording it and mixing it at the same time. And while that's beautiful and exciting, the best way to truly get the best recording possible is to only think about recording on recording day. And that means what you're recording as you go is almost a demo or almost a practice until you feel like, I know this song inside and out. The band knows this song inside and out. When I would record bands remotely, I would say, look guys, we've contracted for this amount of time. I have bought plane tickets and you've paid me this amount of money. I know if you do your part and rehearse, all of you, we can record 4 to 6 songs when I come in for 2 days, 10 to 12 songs if I come in for 4 days. But if you don't rehearse, if you're not ready to go, if you're really screwing up a lot of things, or you're unfamiliar with a song, or you haven't thought through all the parts you want to play, then we're only going to get a couple of songs recorded, and that's on you. And I would put that pressure on them for a reason, because I would say, look, I'm going to do my part. I'm going to come ready to go. I'm going to have sessions prepped. I'm going to know your song inside and out from the raw rough tracks you sent me. And I'm going to bring all the gear and I'm going to be ready to go. But you need to do everything you can do for this marriage to work. And the same is true when you're recording yourself. If you can rehearse, I promise you, you'll have more fun, you'll get more accomplished, and the tracks will sound better. 2, you gotta be comfortable in your environment. This is one reason why I left the big studio environment. As cool as it was, as exciting as it was, it just didn't feel like the right fit for me. I couldn't deny the fact that deep down inside, I'm a home studio guy. I love being in my home studio. I love having the pressure off me. I don't like a lot of people watching me. I don't even like to record in front of people. What's interesting is one of my favorite vocalists of all time, Chris Cornell of Soundgarden and Audioslave fame, he even, working in big studios when they would record all their albums, preferred to record his vocals at home. He bought his own little rig. I think he used Logic and a simple Apogee interface, and he would go into his closet and record a bunch of vocal takes for all the songs that made on the major records, on the major albums. Not every single song, but like a lot of songs. He would record vocals at home by himself. Why? So that people weren't watching him. 2, so that he could experiment with his voice and with different performances and take his time. That's how I feel. I like to be at home. And so that being said, I want to make sure I'm comfortable here. If you're new to home studio recording, you want to make sure that you're comfortable in your environment. Do you have a simple recording setup? That's going to help you be comfortable. If you have a complex recording setup that you don't know how everything works, that's not going to make you feel comfortable. I want the simplest signal chain possible for me personally. Microphone into interface directly into the computer. I don't want any outboard gear that I have to route things through. I don't want a patch bay. I don't want any summing. I just want it to be as direct as possible. So I say the same thing for you. Get the simplest setup you can get that you understand, where you understand the signal flow, you understand your DAW, get familiar with it, get familiar with your room, what part of the room sounds good when you're recording your vocals, where you feel comfortable, and then make sure that you're not stressed on the day you record. If you need to light candles or set the mood with lighting, whatever it is, temperature, get it comfortable in the room. Take a moment to feel comfortable in your space. It makes a huge, huge difference. And final bonus tip, kind of alluded to this before, the best way to get a natural performance is to just record whole takes as much as possible and comp them together later. It's okay to punch in, but don't punch in every 4 bars or every 8 bars or every verse or every chorus. It's not real, it's not natural. And while it's a valid way to work, it takes a real professional musician to stay natural and engaged with recording in that fashion. Most of us do better when we hit record, perform, stop, and then we'll do a couple more takes and see if we can piece together the best parts of those takes. That's not cheating, that's called making a record. It's the way it's been for as long as anyone can remember. And if it helps you create a more natural performance, then that's going to really carry over better in the recording. Now, that was a lot, which makes you think recording, as simple as it can be, to sound good, takes a lot of work. So this is a process. And what's crazy is that the recording process, what we just talked about, is only one of 6 steps in the song production process. Did you know that? I try to remind you of this all the time. But there are 6 distinct steps. Recording is only one of them. In fact, it's the 3rd step. It's step 3 in the entire process. There are 2 steps that come before it, and there are 3 steps that come after it, if I could do my math right. So this is important for you to understand. I want you to get good recordings, but I also want you to prep properly for those recordings. And it's not even the kind of prep we talked about in this video. There's different kind of prep even before that. And then I want you to finalize those recordings better with the following 3 steps that come after recording. And so what I tried to do to give you a leg up is break down every major song you've ever heard, and they all break down into these 6 steps. Like every song has to go through this process. And I've sort of distilled it all down into a simple guide for you that is called My 6 Steps to a Radio Ready Song Guide. It's very simple, easy read. It's a simple PDF. It's absolutely free for you to download. I want you to download it right now. The link's here, radioreadyguide.com, or you can go below this video and click the link in the description. But radioreadyguide.com, download it, read it. There's a bunch of bonus tips and tricks in there as well. And then what I want you to do is print it out, or if you have like a tablet or phone that you keep on your desk, keep it like in a Dropbox folder or somewhere so that you can pull it up every time you're ready to make a song. When you get a song idea, you're like, all right, I want to make this song. Reference that guide and make sure you are following all 6 steps in order to ensure that your song sounds its absolute best when you are finished with it, which is ultimately what we're trying to do. It's absolutely free. I think you'll really enjoy it. It's at radioreadyguide.com. Thanks for watching. Thanks for liking the video. Thanks for subscribing to the channel. And I hope to see you on another video real soon.